Hello and welcome to this webinar from Horizon Web Marketing and the Search Engine Academy. Hope everybody can hear me well. If you would, please just raise your hand. It's over here in the toolbar there. You can raise your hand. Looks like I'm getting a few hands up, so people are hearing me, and so that's great. Thanks, guys. And my name is Scott Callis. I'm with the Search Engine Academy and Horizon Web Marketing. And so, yeah, there I am. And I come from a web developer background. Something changed here. Okay, let's see here. Sorry about this. We've got something changing. I just lost the presentation, Ross.
So you've lost it, Scott.
I've lost it.
So much for the smooth intro, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So GoToWebinar is indeed a strange and mysterious beast, and so for some reason it just spontaneously kicked Scott out of here. So I'm just going to prematurely take over, finish up his intro. Scott will be handling questions on the other side. But he acts as the operations manager for the Search Engine Academy, and he acts as a director of training operations at Horizon Web Marketing. But let me move forward. Just as far as some housekeeping, if you've attended one of these before, you know you can ask questions, and Scott will be monitoring those questions as they come in, and at the end of the presentation, we'll answer as many as we possibly can. Hopefully we'll get to all of them. We also have a handout. Now the screen capture here doesn't show the handout that you would be seeing. We have produced the slides that are here as a PDF, so feel free to download those if you're in attendance here and follow along if you prefer to do it on your screen. We are recording today's session in about 24 hours. Typically, we have the link up, and we certainly don't mind if you share that recording link. As a matter of fact, we'd love to have you do it. And also, if you have to leave before the presentation is over, it's a great way to come back and hear the questions that other people have had about some of the material. So moving right along, my name is Ross Barefoot, and you've probably seen this slide before if you've attended one of our webinars. I have a long and checkered background in small business management. I'll leave you to use your imagination on the checkered part. I also have been a programmer since about 1992, a web developer since about 1996, working as an SEO consultant since 2002, and in 2011 I became a certified master SEO trainer with the Search Engine Academy. I teach workshops in Denver, Salt Lake City, and Las Vegas, and I'm a Google AdWords certified professional. Now, since 2012, I've been the chief SEO strategist at Horizon Web Marketing. And Horizon Web Marketing is a boutique web marketing agency headquartered in Las Vegas, Nevada, and we work with companies large and small. And also, we're increasingly doing SEO training. We do that in the workshop setting that I mentioned before. We also are now offering online SEO training wherever you may be located, in case you can't get to one of our 2-, 3-, or 5-day workshops. So I'll give you some more information about that at the end of the presentation. Don't want to take up too much time here at the beginning. Let's get right into this particular webinar. Here's what we're going to cover in this, and this is kind of unique in that we've split this webinar into a two-part session. Part one is going to be somewhat learning principles and learning how to diagnose problems. And then part two, which is going to be next week, will be what to do about the problems that we diagnose. So the first thing we'll talk about is how to determine how visible you are on Google. And the second is to determine the way Google views your website and why confusing Google ends up being a bad thing and what to do about that. We'll discuss what relevancy is, why it's important, how you can see if your website is manifesting that relevancy. And then we'll talk about authority and why authority is important. Let me move my Skype over here. And so why authority is important, how to see if Google views your website as an authority, and why we would need to put those two things together, both relevancy and authority. Now let's see here. In session 2, we'll talk about how to correct those problems. Okay, somebody just told me that they can't see my slides, so apparently more problems have occurred than I realize. Hold on just one second, let's see if we can deal with this. I guess we got the audio down, Scott, and didn't get the slides down.
Yeah, I think something happened with the changing presenter, so I'm seeing your desktop now. Well, it just went away.
Okay. My apologies for the problems, folks. And let's see here.
Okay.
So Scott, maybe you can tell me what we're seeing. Oh, all right. Matt's giving me a yes, and everybody can see Matt's yes, which is great.
Yep.
So now let me back up for a moment. I don't think there's anything critical we need to go back on. However, somebody tell me, Matt, maybe you can Skype me and let me know what you're seeing on your screen right now. It should be the slide that says what we cover in session 2. Can someone confirm that? Scott, are we seeing that? Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes, see that.
In that case, we'll get back on track here. There's always got to be a webinar moment, doesn't there? So in session 2, we're going to talk about how to correct the problems we identified in session 1. We're going to talk about the 3 basic ways to boost the relevancy of your web pages, the 2 basic ways to build authority and trust with Google, and then we're going to talk about how to use a very effective and affordable tool to improve your website visibility. Before we get started, now actually, and before we get started, I also wanted to launch a poll here for you because I'd like to get a handle on exactly kind of what the level of knowledge is. So let me select a poll here, and I'd like you to just give me as a quick feedback. You can probably see the poll there. Matt, you're my guy in the field out there. You seeing the poll okay? Ah, yes, because we're getting a whole bunch of participation. Good, thank you for that. So yeah, please just take a couple of seconds, and while you're doing that, I'm going to discuss what I started to show on the slide, namely, I've designed this webinar so it'll be useful to all types of businesses, but I am going to be using as a teaching example a business that serves a local community. So if you have a situation basically where you're doing something called local SEO, this will be particularly useful. But I don't want you to get discouraged if you have a business that doesn't serve a local area, because there's still going to be a lot of principles here that you can put to use. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll, and I'll let you know that really it looks like by far the majority in our audience are in the category of intermediate. But the next largest component is is beginner. And so this webinar is targeted at that demographic. Now, if you're in the advanced segment, welcome too. You'll probably find a few principles here that are ones that you've seen many times before, but I'm hopeful that it will also perhaps give you some new information. Now, is this you? Is the question. Okay, so this is so typical that I find in business. So you've made this investment, you've put time, money, and energy in a website. And it could be a brand new website, you got a new business, it's a new situation, or it could just be a redesign of an existing website and it's like new to you. So you've done that, and you're excited, you launch it, you love the way it looks, you know, your family loves the way it looks. Of course, you know, they have to say that, right? And your employees, who also have to say it, but let's say they sincerely do love the way your website look, and most importantly, you're really pleased with it. It's a huge improvement on what you had before. But you find that there's just one problem with it, and I'm going to represent it with the whole field of dreams scenario. You had in your mind's eye that this would be what would happen when you launched your website. And then you find out that you feel more like this is what actually happened. Nobody showed up to take any of those seats. You're not hearing anything back about what's going on. So, like I say, this is a fairly typical problem. If you're in this situation, then you typically are seeing the results of having no visibility in search. And that usually translates into having little or no traffic. And again, don't feel bad if you've got this question. Now, I shouldn't say don't feel bad. You should feel bad, but don't feel like you're unique. Let me put it that way. But you are probably like this guy. You've done all this work, but why don't I show up on Google? You know, you see other sites that look far lousier than yours showing up on Google, so what's going on? In order to explore this, I'm going to take a real-world example. And this is an example that's really close to home for me, and I mean that quite literally, because this is the storefront location for the chiropractor that has been serving me for the last 30 years. His name is Dr. Tom Foote, and his business is called Applied Chiropractic Health Center. Now, at Applied Chiropractic Health Center, he's maybe about a 5-minute walk from here, and that's what I mean by close to home. And so his situation was that he was in the position of that guy who found that he was almost invisible on Google. Now, he began practicing in Grand Junction, Colorado about 30 years ago. So the question is, why would you not know that from looking at Google? If I type in a search for Grand Junction chiropractor, and again, remember this guy is 2 blocks away from me or less. Why is it that I'm not seeing anything? And I go to a Google Maps search. Now notice where the arrow is pointing on the Google Maps search. It's pointing to the exact location of his office. Do you see all the various pinpoints everywhere? It's like you've got this complete abundance of chiropractor results, but poor Dr. Foote, he's not anywhere on there. And forget about being in the top 10. In this case, he's not even in the top 50. Now, here I'm showing, and you can see up at the top right, you see where it's got the little greater than sign and 50. That means, and there you see the first 10 results. So Grand Junction's not a big town. It's hard to find 50 chiropractors. Now, I do want to point out this listing at the right is one that we use. We're using a tool called Bright Local in order to do this type of analysis, and I'm going to be referring to that a number of times. Highly recommend this tool, not just if you're doing local results. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we're learning from local SEO that also applies to you if you're not in local SEO, and you'll see why Bright Local can be a useful tool. I put a link up there. I'll put a link later on as well, so if you're interested in trying the tool out for free, you can do that. So, consequences. Well, what are the consequences for you if you're not showing anywhere on Google? Typically, in the case of Dr. Foote here, what will happen is what's happened to him. His business has been suffering little by little as other practices are getting the internet exposure instead of him. And that's no surprise to anyone. So since I've known this guy since '89, he's telling me about these problems that he's having, attracting any attention exposure on for his business website or for his business. So I decided to give him a hand. But not everyone has an SEO consultant as a friend. Wouldn't that be nice? So I created this webinar for anyone else who's suffering in the same plight. And my goal is to use him as an example that will be useful to some of you who are out there fighting the fight on a day-to-day basis. First of all, let's determine whether you really do have a search engine visibility problem. I'm asking the question here, how invisible is your business? Well, let's do this starting at the most basic level. Start with a search of your business name. Don't even try for anything else at this point in time. Once you do that, try a search on your address, and then do a search on your phone number. Now, finally, once you've looked for any results around those things, and by the way, if you don't get any results around any of those, then you know immediately you do have a pretty serious problem. But then search on those terms that will bring the most likely customers to your website. And those would be the terms that come to your mind intuitively. And those are the ones that typically are going to be the ones that are really obvious to you. What I'm also recommending is that you use a tool such as BrightLocal to do this more quickly and thoroughly. And then I've got this little ironic smiley face. If you find that you really are virtually invisible, you've come to the right place. Now bear with me just one second. I've got to order something here when it comes to my GoToWebinar controls. And now I'm back with you. So just the basics, what every business should know when it comes to this stuff that we're talking about. And by the way, Scott, if you're trying to monitor questions here, and I still had you on mouse control, I've taken you off mouse control now, so you should be able to monitor those questions more easily.
Okay, sounds good, thanks.
Alrighty, so here's just the basics, and I'm telling you that it's really as easy as 1, 2, 3. And I really should correct this slide, because what I should say is it's as simple as 1, 2, 3. And as we know, the old saw, just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy, but it is fairly simple to understand the basic principles. So let's talk about the first one. Google Spider has to find your website and understand it, plus Google's index has to understand it. And we're going to talk a little bit about what these things mean, but what we describe this principle as is being search engine friendly. If you read Google's literature, they'll refer to it as search friendly, but I think you get the right idea here. The number 2 principle is that your website has to be relevant to the searchers that you want to reach. And then the third point is Google has to trust that your website is an authority for the information that those searchers want. So none of these are really related specifically to just local SEO, and particularly for those of you who are intermediate to advanced, and you've run into this division between traditional SEO and local SEO, then this is where you can see that these principles here, they cover the whole spectrum of Google search results. These are the 3 principles that we have to address when we're trying to help a website to get better visibility on Google, and we're going to knock them out one at a time here. The first one has to do with making it easy for Google. Google has to be able to figure out your website. Let's talk about these critters. These are things called spiders. And spiders are actually simply automated search engine programs, and they're called spiders because they crawl the World Wide Web, a term that's not used much anymore, but in the old days, that's what the www came from. And the spiders would crawl from one site to another, and hence they got the term spiders. They're not only referred to as spiders, though, they're also called bots or robots. So these automated programs are constantly out there visiting websites without any human intervention, and eventually they are going to make it to your domain. Once they hit your domain, what they're going to try to do is crawl to all your other pages. Well, what do they do then? Then they sort of switch their role from being a spider to being a scout, because what a spider does is it sends whatever it finds back to its master, those who sent it, namely the search engine. And at the search engine, they have a huge relational database of web pages, and that's called an index. So the spider sends any data that it finds back to the index. Now, if Google or Bing, as the case may be, thinks that your web page is relevant to a particular search and they trust its authority, then just maybe when someone searches on a phrase that's relevant to that site, they're going to show you in search results. So that's the process. And it's being able to make sure those spiders can crawl your website properly that we call making it search engine friendly. Now a bit more on this relevancy issue. If you searched, for example, for a headache remedy, but you get pages that are related to insomnia, they're probably useless to you, unless, of course, the insomnia is creating your headache. But why would those pages be useless? Naturally, because they're not relevant to what you're searching for. Google needs to know that your web pages are about the topics that you want to rank for. Now, this seems obvious, but I'm going to explore with the Applied Chiropractic website ways in which it's not really obvious, and we'll get into that in just a few moments. Third point, a bit more on that, and that is this notion of authority. Google has to trust that your business is real, and they need to trust that your website is trusted by other people. Well, is your website trusted by others? In order to judge this matter, Google looks to see if other quality websites link to your website, and if they do, Google sees that as an indicator of trust. Now, every time another site publishes a link to your site, Google thinks of it as a vote. It's basically a vote in favor. But there's one catch to this, and that is some votes do count for more than others. Votes from spammy sites are going to hurt you. Votes from good sites are going to help you. Now, let me illustrate this whole notion of backlinks. Here we have a website called PetSupplies.com. And in the course of looking for supplies for her pet, a lady named Mary is out there and she happens across your website. Maybe you recommended it to her, maybe a friend did. You've put a lot of effort into this site. It's a good site, there's lots of stuff on it, and so Mary thinks to herself, what a great website this is. I'm really happy I found it. But there's something else you don't know about Mary, and that is Mary loves to blog, and she maintains a blog to share with other people articles on her love of animals. Well, she decides, this site is so good, I'm going to blog about this new resource I found. I'm going to put a link up to it, and that way other people can see what I've discovered. In its most traditional, and Google would call it organic, non-artificial, natural way, this is how a link happens. If the site is really good, and this is the perfect world according to Google, if the site is really good, it won't be just Mary who gives it a thumbs up. It'll be all those other people that find it with similar, maybe overlapping types of interests, and eventually with enough people visiting and enough of them controlling pages on websites, more and more links are created to the site, and every one of those links is viewed as a thumbs up or a vote in favor of the site. And this is what is the key to authority from Google's standpoint. Now, that has to do with this notion of authority, but there's kind of a tributary to this. And the tributary to this is Google also needs to trust if the business is a real business. Google asks itself, is this really whatever it's looking at? Is this a real business? So in the old days, most real businesses could be found in the good old-fashioned yellow pages. Now, things have changed. We still have those, but they're far less of a fact of life than they used to be. I just illustrate, though, how this has been kind of used in the past by my experience when I was in the bicycle business. And this is back before the age of the internet, and we sold bicycle parts and accessories to about 2,000 bicycle dealers across the United States. We would only sell wholesale. We would not sell to consumers. So we needed to know if someone called us on the phone and they said, hey, I'm Joe's Bike Shop in, Maryland. I'd like to buy from you. And we had any suspicions at all, what would we ask them to do? We would ask them to send us a copy of their Yellow Pages ad, because real businesses tended to be found in those Yellow Pages. Now, in this internet age, most of these real businesses are found in the modern equivalent of the Yellow Pages, and that would be things like, as you can see on the left, Google My Business, Bing Places, Yahoo Business, Yelp. There's all sorts of others of these business directory listings. Now again, those of you who know local SEO, you're probably thinking, well, this is just local. But as we've discovered at Horizon Web Marketing, and this has been particularly through the work of our veteran link builder, Matt Campbell, we're finding that more and more consistency in these directories is also having an impact when it comes to ranking in traditional SEO. So if you're not doing local SEO, don't dismiss what we're talking about here when it comes to consistency and allowing Google to be able to determine if your business is a real business. Well, what do we learn from spiders when it comes to these things? Google uses automation to understand the web, and we already saw that when we were talking about how spiders automatically crawl and send back information to Google. But they don't just crawl your website when they're trying to understand your business. They also crawl third-party websites. So they do indeed visit your website, but Google also is going to be scraping information about your business from Yelp and Facebook, Bing, Yahoo, Yellow Pages, Foursquare, all these various things. And then all these various points of presence by Google are going to be used by Google to pull all this data into their index. And then Google tries to make sense of all the data. This is why business listing directories become a key to a consistent picture of your business, because these directories typically show the business name, its address, and its phone number. We're going to come back to this, and we're going to discuss it according to the acronym that everybody in SEO uses, which is NAP, name, address, phone number. Now, if the details shown for your business are inconsistent, guess what it does? It confuses Google. And what we see over and over again is when Google becomes confused about a business, it tends not to trust that business. And Google doesn't like showing businesses that it doesn't trust. Well, that wasn't so bad, was it? Just 3 things to understand. We've talked about those 3 things. Now let's put them to work. Let's take this example. Remember, Dr. Foot. Now we already know that he's almost invisible on Google, and we're going to start looking at what are the possible reasons for that. Let's take, first of all, his web presence, and this is just a screen capture of his website. It's got a great name, appliedchiropractic.com, matches the name of the business. I'd like you to notice that the name of the business is not Dr. Tom Foot or Dr. Thomas Foot. It's Applied Chiropractic Health Center, PC. Now keep that in mind as we go forward. What's our first question? Is it easy for Google's spider? So what I recommend to businesses, and let me just digress for a moment to say, I'm trying to give you a particular protocol that you can apply even if you're a busy business person and you don't want to quit your day job and become an SEO. So keep that in mind also. That's the context for what we're going to be talking about here. So take an inventory of the website pages, and the way I normally do this is by doing what's called a site search. This is using something called a special operator in Google. I'm going to give you an example of how to do it. When you do that, you ask yourself how many pages are showing up. Does Google index all or most of the pages on your website? And if pages are missing, which ones? So the next screen here is going to be your example. Now you can notice up here at the top, it says site : and this is just typed into a normal Google search bar, site : www.appliedchiropractic.com. Now notice the number of results that are shown right below that, 6 pages. Of course, this seems very, very small, but in this case, it's also very, very accurate because this website, it only has a few pages to it. Typically, most people who have a business website, and this could be the case for you, you're going to have a sense of how many pages are on your website. Maybe it's 30, maybe it's 40, maybe it's 100. If, for example, you have 100 pages on your website and you know that, and you see that there are 6 results, then you're going to have a problem. So what does your inventory show? If you go and do this, and if you're doing if you're watching this webinar as a recording, go ahead and pause it. Go and do that site : search on your website right now. Now, if most of your pages are showing, that's fine. Let's not beat this thing to death. Move on to the next part of this. On the other hand, if no pages show, then the likely culprit is a special file called robots.txt And it's very possible that that file has blocked or confused Google's Spider. I'm not going to go into some technical discussion of robots.txt here, but I am going to give you a resource, and you'll be able to click on this link in the PDF, or you can just jot it down and go to it, where I've got a 15-minute video that tells you about the robots.txt. You only need to look at that video if you find that a lot of your pages are not showing up in Google's index. So that's your first step. And again, these are real rough measures, but you'll be surprised at how many businesses we come across where a basic error in a robots.txt has blocked Google Spider from indexing pages. And although this is not a common thing to happen, it's still something that you have to check and get out of the way before you move on to relevancy. And then if you've moved on, you ask yourself about your own site, is it relevant? Now, this is like anything else. We could do a whole day's course on relevancy, but I'm going to just tell you to look at a few important aspects to get a rough view of whether your web page and the various pages of your site are actually showing relevancy to the people that you want to reach. So here's the aspects that you're going to be looking at. Something called the title, something called the main headline, or the H1. And there's one other aspect, but let's talk about these two first. Now for this particular step, I recommend a free browser extension for Chrome, and it's called OpenSEO Stats. Some of you may be at a basic enough level that you don't really use extensions that much. If that's the case, once again, I don't want to bog down the presentation, but I've got a 10-minute video here you can link over to, and it's an introduction to how to get extensions into your browser. It's focused on Chrome, but how to get extensions installed on your browser. Now, once you do, you're going to see an extension, and again, this is looking at Chrome, but you see up here at the right where the arrow is pointing, that's a blow up of the little icon that shows that we're running an extension. And when we click on that extension, it gives us a lot of information about the page that we're looking at in our browser. And right here, I'm looking at this particular tab in the tool called Page Info. Now, when I do, there's only a couple that I really look at first, and one is the title. And notice what it says here. This in the note, this corresponds, for those of you who know HTML at all, this corresponds to something called the HTML title tag. Now there's another one to look at here, and it's represented as H1. And that corresponds to the H1 tag in HTML, and it's the top level or the most important headline on the page. Now let's look at applied chiropractic. And my question is, what's wrong with this title? I'm not going to labor the point with you. I'll just tell you right away what I see is wrong with the title is that the title doesn't really demonstrate a relevancy to what people search for. This is fairly subtle here. The title says chiropractic care. Well, if someone's looking for a chiropractor, they're usually searching on chiropractor, not on chiropractic. Here's a good illustration that I use for this. If somebody recommends to you because your back is hurting or because you have some problem, they say, you really should try a chiropractor. Someone wants to research whether chiropractic is a scam, they might search on chiropractic. But if they're just wanting to find a chiropractor, they're going to search based on the professional. Is this a subtle point? Yes, it is, but it's still an important point for this particular market segment. Now let's take a look at this H1 tag. Well, remember we're talking about making the website relevant. The H1 is an extremely important part of your page. It's your main headline, and Google looks at that as having a particularly important signal for the relevancy of the page. So what does this headline say the page is relevant to? Services. Does that really help Google know where to show this website? It doesn't. See, it doesn't create that clarity. So we have a title tag that uses really the wrong vocabulary, and then we have an H1 tag that, or a headline that has no vocabulary at all. In the case of his website, next week we're going to come back and we're going to change these and make them relevant. So make sure you come back for those examples. But beyond that, those two, and it's just two really critical elements that I tell most small business people to look at, again, to try to make this a manageable task. But you also need to analyze the main content text on your page. By the way, the main content there, that's actually a term that Google uses when it's training its quality control people how to evaluate a website. They say find the main content and study that main content. And the main content is easy. When you go and start reading the stuff that's on the page as a visitor would, that's the main content. So for small businesses to do this, I'm not going to recommend an extension. There's an important tool you can use. It's free, and most of us already have it. It's called Common Sense. All you have to do is this: look at your page and ask yourself, what is this page about? And pretend it's your first time to the page. We all make these judgments all the time whenever we visit a page, whether it's a piece of written paper or whether it's a web page. We're judging what is it about. And that's basically all that you need to do. Now think of a keyword that represents what you want the page to be about and which will attract searching customers. So you have these things in mind and you're comparing what do you want it to be about, what is it about. But let's go to one little piece of analysis we can do. I say here Control F it, and if you're a Mac user you would Command F it. Here's what I mean by that. I'm looking here at Dr. Foot's page, and notice up here at the top right I have the word chiropractic typed into a field. Well, what's this field? The field is what comes up when you do Control F in Google Chrome. And that Control F means find on page. Now most browsers have something like this. Firefox, you would see this box show up in the lower left. In Safari, you're going to see it in the upper right, and you're going to use Command F. Internet Explorer, the same thing. So basically, it means find on page, and then you type anything into that box. And you can see up there that when I type in the word chiropractic, you notice here it says 1 of 7. That means on the home page of this website, the word chiropractic is used 7 times. And this highlighting here is not highlighting I put in for this slide. This is the highlighting that comes up automatically when you're doing Control F. Remember we talked about the subtle but important difference between chiropractic and chiropractor? Well, we go on and we type in chiropractor. Notice how many times that appears on the page. 0 of 0. So no occurrences for chiropractor, a good number of occurrences for chiropractic. From what we've already examined, is that the best balance to have? And the obvious answer is no, it's not. Those are 3 areas that we've looked at here that give you a quick way on any page to see what is the basic relevancy of the page and compare it to what you know people might be searching for. Now let's move on to being authoritative and trustworthy. Now we discussed 2 ways that Google determines this. One is backlinks, and that's links from other sites to your site. And the other is the consistency of this NAP, for name, address, phone number, in business listing directories. There's a number of ways to check this out, as there is for so many things. I'm going to return to this tool that we use pretty frequently in our shop, and that is BrightLocal. Here again is a link that you can use to sign up for a trial. And I just want to tell you that on the next couple of slides, I'm going to be showing you screen captures from using BrightLocal. So let's ask, how well does Dr. Foot score on backlinks? Well, within BrightLocal, I go to something they call an SEO checkup, and I run a report on his practice. Now notice what I get here over on the right. According to BrightLocal's SEO checkup, the Applied Chiropractic has 1 link pointing at it, and the average number of links for competitors is 6. Now beyond that, notice the domain authority. Domain authority is actually a metric that is created by Moz, and you can see the little attribution there underneath it, powered by Mozscape. And 5 of 100, in case you didn't just intuit this already, means there's very, very little authority. It's very poor when it comes to authority. The good news for Dr. Foote is that the competitive bar is extremely low in this particular segment, so there's hope. If we're looking at his competitor average as having, well, it may be 3 times what he does in the number of linking domains, 6 times in the number of links, but still, based on my experience, those are pretty low numbers. So there is hope for him to be able to achieve competitive parity or even superiority here with a little bit of work, which is what we'll talk about next week. Well, what about this issue of NAP consistency? Remember what NAP means. It's name, address, phone number. How clear is the business that's listed in the panel at the right? And this is, again, this is from Bright Local Citation Tracker. Now notice this. We've got Applied Chiropractic Health Center PC. That's Google Local, and that is correct because I actually corrected it for him, by the way. And then there's Yahoo Local says Foote Thomas A. And then finally, City Search has the business name as Merging Chiropractic Care, which is a name that he has never used. So this is painting a pretty muddy, confusing picture for Google when it's looking at how this business and how this address is represented across the various directories. Now there's one other area here. As I mentioned, Google can even confuse themselves. One of the reasons is it's paying attention to what other people are putting online about a particular business listing. So notice here, Google, if I go to Google My Business, which is business.google.com, and if I do a search, and we'll get into this a little bit more next week in terms of the hands-on, notice how Google has 2 different listings for this particular business. On the left, we have Applied Chiropractic Health Center, and on the right, we have Thomas Foote, DC. Now remember, there is really no business entity called Thomas Foote, DC. There's a person named that, but the business is Applied Chiropractic Health Center, and the business website is appliedchiropractic.com. So Google is not going to know which one of these to show as the real business, and they may not show either. As we've seen just at the outset, they really aren't showing either. All right, so we've walked through some of our diagnoses, and let's summarize the situation for Tom Foote. First of all, his website seems to be technically okay and is search engine friendly, so it passes check number 1, but it does not show proper relevancy, so it fails check number 2, and it confuses Google, which harms its trustworthiness and therefore its authority, so it fails check number 3. So what now? Well, we've identified some important issues with Dr. Foote's website. In our next session, we're going to talk about how to correct these issues, but I felt you needed to have this background information before we get into the actual work that we do to clean it up. Now, the next installation of this webinar is and notice I've italicized what to do about it, is same time, same place, Thursday next week at 1 p.m. Pacific and 4 p.m. Eastern. And so let's see, should we do questions now, or should I go through other training opportunities? Scott, what would you prefer?
We could start with some questions.
All right, let's get those done.
Yeah, let's. If you've got some questions, go ahead and enter them into the question box there in your control panel. First question, when we start working with the local listings, what are some good ways that we need to, for example, the NAP, what's a good way to start addressing that?
Well, again, the best way to, when you say addressing it, is this once, is whoever's asking this question, does it have to do with once we first determined that there is a problem, or is this in determining that there's a problem?
Let's say that it's determining that there's a problem.
Determining a problem, typically you're going to need to go to a tool for this. There are some manual ways to do it. Here's one of the manual ways to determine if there's a problem with name, address, phone number consistency, and that is do a search on your business address. When you do a search on your business address, what Google is going to bring back to you is the businesses that it thinks are relevant to that particular address. So since it's just looking at the address relevancy, it's not going to worry about things like whether there are backlinks or whether the proper verbiage is typed in. It's just going to say, okay, what are websites out there that are associated with this address? And that'll bring also back all these directories, and sometimes you'll see pages and pages of listings from directories, and then you can start scanning down those search results to see whether the name of the business and the phone number are consistently represented. Now you can go the other way on this, and that is you can type in the phone number, do the same thing, and see if the address and the name are consistent. And this is particularly good if you have a business that has moved around, has changed its location once or more times, and you put in the phone number, which usually doesn't change. Often you'll get some old listings thrown into the results where you see the old address. That could be confusing things as well. Should have put Skype on Do Not Disturb. So that would confuse things as well. But really, the best thing is to try to, that has got to be a spammer. The best thing to do, however, is to try to use a tool such as BrightLocal in order to do the citation tracker check, such as we did during this presentation. So again, there are other tools out there such as WhiteSpark, MozLocal. If you go to MozLocal, they'll even do a free trial that'll give you a basic overview of this. So typically, those are just a few ideas about how to do that.
Great. Okay, next question. What if the arrow on Google Places is in the wrong place?
Well, if the arrow's in the wrong place, Google will allow you to correct that. What you have to do in order to do that, though, first is show that you have a right to edit that listing. And so you do that by doing something called claiming the business listing, and Google will ask you to do a verification. Now, I'll show some just kind of a basic introduction to this process next week, but the upshot of it is pretty easy. What you have to do is you say to Google, through business.google.com or through Google Maps, you basically say, I am authorized to modify this listing, and Google says, okay, we'll prove it. We're going to send out a postcard, and if you really are at the business address, you'll be there to receive the postcard, right? Hint, hint. And so and because people try to claim listings that aren't theirs all the time, you get the business card, it'll have a code on it, you put that in, Google then will allow you to edit the business listing and will allow you to move the map pin to where it needs to be. There is something else to be said for this, though, because even this process is a little bit obscure. For example, when I was working on the Yelp listing, for example, for Applied Chiropractic, they're pulling their map results from Google, and for the address, they had the map pin in the wrong place, but if you go to Google and Google the address, it's in the right place. And what that basically means to say is you have to check this at more than one place, at more than one point of presence, and often you'll need to correct that map pin in different directories as well as just at Google. But that's the basic way to do it.
That sounds great. Hopefully that helps there. Next question from Yoshiko. What happens when Google Index gets too large to be efficient?
Well, that's a question more for Google, and we'll know when we get there, Yoshiko, because we haven't got there yet. Google has a database of billions and billions and billions of pages, and they've been able to maintain a pretty good job of keeping track of it. However, that having been said, this is why sometimes we need to make things extraordinarily clear for Google, because they're not going to be doing a lot of real-time analysis on search results. Most of their analysis occurs when they're indexing. This is why it's really important for us to be working at this stuff now so that it filters into Google's index. They do their preliminary indexing. It's also one of the reasons why you will see that it takes so long for search engine optimization to actually have the impact that you want it to. And at Horizon Web Marketing, we do run into this issue often with clients where we'll go through the necessary steps to optimize their site, and then we'll tell them, you know, it's going to take months to start seeing a real impact from this. And one of the reasons is because it is such a huge index. So one of the things that happens, Yoshiko, to be more on point with your question, is that Google has to employ all sorts of backup strategies that take time, and it slows down your ability to see improvements when it comes to the work that you do. But with patience, typically you will see those improvements starting to pay off in better visibility.
That sounds great. One last question that we have so far is from Kim, and it says, one thing I've found is that sometimes the website URLs are not search-friendly like this, and it gives an example here, www.business.com / kind of a random alphanumeric / other random alphanumeric / home. More of a statement there, but I'm assuming the question would be, what would we do with URLs like that?
Well, Kim, first of all, I'd have to say that that is typically a problem. Most of the times, SEO will try to be making search engine friendly URLs. And there it depends on the platform that's being used, the type of URL that Scott just described. I've seen, for example, with some of the website builder platforms like Wix, sometimes they have very unfriendly URLs. I don't know if they've done anything to correct that lately, but it's one of my big problems with the Wix platform. You know, not meaning to bash anybody in particular, but I just know that's where I've seen it before. So most platforms, like particularly WordPress, allows you to change those URLs. Now, one of the things that I will say is if you're dealing with a website where the URLs are also are already there and already have, for example, people pointing links at them, so you're dealing with a legacy problem, you need to change the URLs, whether it means getting off of that platform onto a different one or changing them within the platform. But jot this down, you need to make sure that you do a 301 redirect from the cryptic old URL to the search engine friendly new URL. And if you like, you can submit a question on that. We've done work, we've done some training on 301s, we do it in our workshop. I don't really have time to go into it, but just jot that down. Make sure that if you change URLs, whether it's from unfriendly to friendly or just change them because you're migrating to a new website platform, you need to put in place these 301 redirects in order to make sure that you don't do short-term harm with Google while you're trying to do long-term benefit.
Okay, that's yeah. She said. I'm assuming she, yes, and also e-commerce store as well. So possibly a shopping cart or something is giving that same issue with the odd URLs. So
yeah, that definitely can be the case.
So hopefully that answered the questions there, and that's all the questions we have.
Okay, well then let me wrap it up by talking about some of the other training opportunities we have. We'll go over these next time as well. One of the things that we want to point out is we do have an online digital class called Real World SEO Essentials. Now, this is the first digital training offered by Horizon Web Marketing. It's done in association with the Search Engine Academy. Its pricing is $497 for lifetime access. It consists of 9 modules, and it covers the how-to of this, what we've covered today in detail, plus a number of other things such as keyword research, some more on the technical SEO, but basically the premise of this particular training, and it's about 6 hours worth of training, but the premise of Real World SEO Essentials is being directed towards a business person who, once again, doesn't need to devote themselves full time to SEO. So definitely, if that sounds like it would help your situation, you don't even have to pay for the course in order to try it out. You can go to the link that I have at the bottom of the screen and sign up for the first 3 modules for free. Try it out. See if it's going to help you to move forward. Now, the gold standard for us is workshop training. That's the next level. If you've learned something useful during 1 hour, imagine how much you would learn and be able to apply from attending one of our 2, 3, or 5-day workshops. Here I have the link to Horizon Web Marketing's, the workshops that we have coming up in 2017. We have workshops coming up in August in Las Vegas and in October in Denver. So definitely check that out. And we've already done the Q&A, so the last thing to say is thanks for coming for this session. Make sure if this has been valuable and it's on the right track for you to come back for part 2 next week when we talk about what to do about some of the problems we've diagnosed. And so, Scott, we're going to go ahead and wrap it out now, and thank you very much for helping to moderate through all the technical difficulties, and to all those who are in attendance, thanks for coming, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.